Welcome to. Yeah, don't look at my hair. Welcome to Christy by Catherine Marshall, chapter 37. And look how much left of this book we have to read. Not a lot. Okay. I'm going to have you at an odd angle so that I can have my reading light on. But it's an incandescent light, and it makes my phone really hot if I'm not careful. Okay. Christy, chapter 37. Let's see how long this is. Because I have to go pee, which I should have done already. Okay, it's not a very long chapter. Okay. Now that many shared experiences with folks like Miss Alice and Fairlight and Opal, Little Burl and Mountie, and Isaac had laid foundations of mutual caring and trust. These relationships, even with the children, were striking deeper levels. More and more often, my school children were opening up to me these hidden areas. One Thursday afternoon, Zadie Spencer came by the mission excited about a hant tale that her father had brought home from the man talk at Bob Allen's mill. Teacher, Granny Barclay seen old Marthy. Old Marthy's a witch. Ugly as a coot. No hair hardly. Monstrous red eyes. The little girl's black eyes in her thin face were aglitter with an unhealthy excitement. You dassn't not believe it. Lots of folks have seen old Marthy. Keeps a creepin' from house to house, hiding things from folks. One time, throwed ashes into Mistress Allen's churn. Spoiled all of it. Zadie was shivering, her breath coming in little palpitating gasps. I knew that Granny Barclay was reputed to have second sight, a belief in seeing into the future which the Scottish and Irish immigrants have brought with them to the New World. It's not... Trust me, it's real. But not everybody, a lot of people would make it more than it is. So some of it may have been authentic, but the superstitions still being handed down to children like Zadie were incredible. I thought about how often, after my pupils had come to know and to trust me, they'd come to school bright-eyed and excited over ghost stories replete with vivid details. Jealous witches forcing someone into the cove to eat witch balls. Witch balls are pine needles wrapped round and round with human hair. The devil forcing... Now, witches and devils, it's a common misconception. Witch means wise woman or wise person. Devil, and there is no devil worship in the craft, okay? I'm just saying. The devil forcing a group of one by one to kiss his buttocks as a pledge of allegiance. Or the devil driving a cart black as ink drawn by a black oxen down the mountainside. I put one arm around Zadie. And what did your father and mother say about this story of old Martha? Mama just got a funny look into her eyes. Said she'd heard a pack of dogs howling in the night. Said it was a bad sign. I sighed, remembering Fairlight's long silences, knowing well that same look Zadie had seen in her mother's eyes. Yes, there was trouble there, somewhere in the depths of Fairlight's spirit, and I must find a way to reach it. Again, I pulled my thoughts back to the little girl leaning against my arm. Zadie, I asked gently, are you afraid of the dark? Oh, yes'm. It's scary to have to leave the firelight and walk into the shadows to bed. Most nights I put the kivers over my head. Gives me prickles to peer at the dark. Always scared for fear I'll see a ghost. I know. I used to be like that when I was a little girl. You was? Yes, I was. Sometimes I'd long to run and climb into bed between my mother and father, but then I'd be too ashamed to let them know that I was scared because I was a big girl, too big a girl for that. Excuse me. So I'd lie there in my own bed, shivering and shaking. Zadie was looking at me with new interest. How'd you get over it? One day, they sang a certain hymn at Sunday school. Seemed as if it was just for me. I'll sing the refrain for you. God will take care of you through every day or all the way. He will take care of you. He will take care of you. That's nice. So whenever I was scared of the dark, I'd sing those 4 lines over and over to myself. And you know what, Zadie? After a while, the love of God was more real to me than any old ghost. And then all the ghosts went away, and ever since the dark has seemed like friendly and cozy like. Zadie hugged me and planted a wet kiss on my cheek. Sing it again, teacher, so I won't disremember it. So I did, and the little girl skipped out the door humming. After she had gone, I sat there pondering the fine line between faith and superstition. Between that realistic facing up to life that Miss Alice was always urging on me and handing over a faith to the power of negative and evil. Like that 16-year-old girl in Miss Alice's school in Catalici. The girl had been dying of tuberculosis, and her one request of Alice Henderson was not for help to get well, but that she would make her a shroud so that she could see it and try it on before she died. Indignantly, Miss Alice had refused, suggesting to the girl that instead she would do better to send her thinking on health. But the death had more dramatic appeal. The child had finally persuaded her father to measure her and build her a pine coffin. Then she had herself photographed lying in the coffin, so that I can see how fancy fine I'll look. The girl died 8 months later. How could one so young actually prefer death to life? Yet the 16-year-old's fatalism was common in these mountains. Some of this pessimism seemed to have had its source from nature itself. In the Highlanders' experience, nature was more stern than benevolent. From the depleted soil of the rock-strewn hillsides, the mountain people wrested their meager harvests. There was no kindness, only travail and misery in the howling winds whipping down from the snow-capped peaks, whistling through the chinks of cabins, penetrating scanty clothes to the bone marrow. Little man, stood defenseless and insignificant, forgotten and forlorn against the mighty mountains. God, where was God? Somewhere out beyond that vast sweep of nature, his lightnings flashed. His thunderbolts were hurled. They reverberated from peak to peak, zigzagging across the skies, splitting the trunks of great trees from branch tip to root top. At times striking dead a man caught in the elemental fury. And for them, the issues of life and death were joined. Just think about it, folks. Death is as natural as life. So why do we fear it? I don't, right? We just fear the unknown of it, you know? And for them, the issues of life and death were joined. Nor did God stay his hand. Not for storms or pestilence or the disease that carried many to early graves. Not for the hatred that rived hearts before it riddled bodies. Not even for the poverty that ground men and women and children into the dust of not caring. So this God must be Jehovah, Yahweh, the God of Mount Sinai, from whom Moses had hidden his face in terror. He was the God of the Old Testament, whose prophet Elijah could curse naughty children in the name of the Lord and count it proper revenge when she-bears came out of the wood to rend the babes. And men hacked their enemies to death, shouting the name of the Lord. The winds blew and the seas raged, and men fled this being, lest he wrest them from the scanty security they had. How could little man hope to comprehend such a being? So man's only change was to ally himself to him through such obedience as he could manage to stand what has to be stood, to slough his way through or slough his way through day by day, and desperately hope that in the end this terrible Jehovah would bring the faith ones to glory in a better life than this one. I hear you, Doris. But you know what? They'll be fine. Okay? We will be fine. It's the ones that are left behind that we worry about, right? That was the Highlanders' faith. It was a belief to make the heart quake, not to comfort it. Shadows, Stygian shadows of the mountains had cast their pall even on faith. As with Zadie in her fear of the dark, so with her mother. After I had known the Spencers for several months, I came to see a connection between these fears and the location of their cabin. Anyone seeing the Spencer land for the first time would have supposed that the cabin at the top of Lonesome Ridge would always be in full daylight. Instead, the land wore the sharpest contrasts of light and shadow of any place I had seen in that area. At different times of the day, the higher peak opposite shut out the sun, plunging portions of the ridge into blackness. Since that afternoon of Bob Allen's brain operation, when I had first watched the sun dipping behind the sheer rise of the pinnacles opposite, how often Fairlight and I had seen that shadow creep across the face of the ridge. It was like an immense hand raised between the sun and the one who watched. From between the fingers of the giant's hand, a few streaks of light filtered through the trees. But in between, eerie ebony dusk lay across the land. I'd say 8 and up is fine. There's no language. There's no sex. There's no, I don't see why not. Once I asked Jeb why his ancestors had not built in a more protected and accessible spot. He had not known. Grand Sir Spencer could have told me, but he had died in the spring 2 years before. Perhaps the answer was that Jeb's great-great-great-grandmother, just over from the misty highlands of Scotland, had been the first Spencer to watch the giant's hand come between her and the sun. She must have seen that shadow creeping up the side of their ridge day after day. So she had directed her menfolk, build as high up as possible, there on the backbone of our land near the sun. But not even the top of the bald of the ridge had been high enough to escape the gloaming, which is sundown. And I wondered, the time between the sun going down and going out. You know what I mean? And I wondered if the ancestors of Jeb's had been as depressed by the daily shrouding of the sun as Fairlight often was, as almost anyone would be. In fact, it was uncanny how faithfully Fairlight reflected in her nature the variations of light and shade of the mountains around her. For she could be as gay as a careless child. Then abruptly her mood would change, and I would see behind her frightened eyes the Cimmerian shadows of a complex nature. While it pleased me that my company mostly drew out the gay side, I was more and more troubled that at this deepest level I did not seem to be helping at all. Gradually, I learned how deep these inarticulate emotions ran, how surging they were. I was thinking about all this one afternoon when Fairlight and I were sitting on her front porch shelling shucky beans. She was not very talkative, though she had commented that Jeb had a right good turn with the bees. He muscled out out of the cove 235 pounds of honey, best ever for a fact. Of course, if he was making tracks for fortunes, we could make more bee gums. Oh, wait. That's wonderful, Fairlight. Of course, if we was making tracks for fortune, we could make some more bee gums. Of course. No, it ain't to be thought of. Why not? Don't need no more of this world's goods. Some folks get plumb mesmerized when paper money is shook before their eyes. But Fairlight, you still need so many things, basic things. There's not the slightest danger of you getting greedy. There was no answer. I looked at Fairlight and realized that she had not heard my last sentence. It was late in the afternoon. Now, with the sun dipping, she was staring at the pinnacle opposite, with a look on her face that I had seen so often, a look that frightened me. Christy, her musical voice low and confidential. Still, she did not turn her head to look back at me. See that other mountain? Sometimes I think it's witched. Most every day it puts me in the mind of the shadow of death. Her pan of beans slipped off her lap. She slid to her knees, reached for my arm, clinging to it, her mouth set in a grim line. What is to be will be. Nothing can stop it. It has to come to us all sometime, I reckon. But Christy, I gets the trembles when I think about being put in a box and lying out there somewhere covered over with dirt. Remember, folks, that's just our sleeve. That never, we're no longer in that body. Her voice had sunk to a whisper as if she was revealing too much. I started to say, Fairlight, how silly, you're not going to die, but the words withered on my tongue. That would be too glib a reply. Not true, either. All of us do have to die sometime, but I was still too young to have thought much about death. And death wasn't real to me, whereas it was for Fairlight. In her short lifetime, she had seen so many die. One of her and Jeb's children, a newborn baby girl, Celie, and Jeter, a little boy of 3. A score of friends and relatives. And back here in the mountains, people were forced to look starkly into the face of the black hooded figure. There was no way to soften or dodge any least malevolent detail. No undertakers, nothing but a pine box or a half a bee gum log, which the family must prepare. A hole in the red clay, which the family, sometimes boys as young as Isaac McCone, must dig. No camouflage or self-deception was possible. For one as impressionable as Fairlight, this had left permanent scars. Knowing this, there struggled in my mind some thought about the danger of getting our gaze riveted on that dirt as the only reality, about how necessary it is to raise our eyes to see something beyond the pine box and the clay. I wanted to ask. I knew that to him the sensitive spirit of the woman beside me would be cherished. I had watched that spirit waken, start to leave resignation behind and begin the struggle to cast off limitations. Let there be light. She had learned it in her first reading lesson. Fairlight's spirit was not going to be snuffed out like a gutted candle and plunged into darkness. Not for a moment could I have believed that. Fairlight seemed to expect no reply, no consolation in words. She simply needed to feel me close to her. With a shock, I understood that I could not speak to her fears as easily as I had to Zadie's. In her thinking, at least, it was too late for discussion or argument against the deep emotions that tortured her. Her battle with the mountain had become a personal battle. This was now her life pitted against a shadow. And even as I watched, the sun dipped behind the peak and the heinous gloom slanted across her upturned face. Join me next time for chapter 38. And how many of these chapters are there? Doesn't say. Well, what's the last chapter? There are 46 chapters, which means we have 8 left. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you again soon. Take care. God bless. Mwah.